I want to thank some of you from the bottom of my heart for feeling like it was your God-given responsibility to mock my sweater this morning. When I saw it on the mannequin, it looked really good. Anyway, I'll move on. It's a great time of year, isn't it? I mean, it's fun, it's exciting. We did something yesterday. I don't know if you've read the book. I think there's a book out, something like, 20 Minutes in Hell, something like that. We went Christmas shopping in Fairview Heights yesterday. I'm going to write a book. I mean, it's nuts out there right now, as you can imagine. We went to my wife and my son Camden. We went out and just did some Christmas shopping. And people lose their minds this time of year, don't they? We went to Toys R Us, which, I'm excited to go into Toys R Us. There's something about, even as we get to be adults, there's something about us that love to go into a toy store and see all these cool little things and reminisce and say, wow, I wish, we would have had these cool toys when I was a kid. And so it's fun to go in, but it was just amazing to walk into there. And of course, we had to have the pep talk with my son Camden about, we're not buying anything, wink, wink. And so we had that talk and we went in, and it always amazes me just when you walk into a place like that around this time of year, people are just, again, they lose their minds. And it was funny because we walked past several carts where there was a little boy or a little girl in the cart just absolutely screaming that they wanted a toy, and the mom and dad were trying to calm them down and not make a scene. And I would just walk by with my son and my wife and just kind of smile and think, yeah, we've been there, done that, We went from there to Target, which Target is a nice store, and it's always just kind of a calm store you go into. Not this time of year. People are crazy this time of year there. And then we went to the mall. And as we was walking around the mall, it was just, again, people everywhere and mass chaos. And I couldn't help but think. Now listen, I'm not a hey, fight against some of those Christmas traditions. I enjoy some of those things. I enjoy, we have the Elf on the Shelf. I don't know if you've done that, Elf on the Shelf, and it really helps us keep our kids behaved. Because my kids are absolutely convinced that we got an elf that watches them, right, Camden? Keeping an eye on them. And so I'm not anti those things. I'm not saying, hey, we got to cut all that stuff out. But I couldn't help but as we were walking through the mall, it came across my mind that, wow, this is what Christmas has become for many of us. The hustle and the bustle and the stress. We got to get our kids, our grandkids, our spouse, we have to get them that perfect gift, and we spend an outrageous amount of money, many times money that we probably shouldn't be spending or maybe don't even have. But that's what Christmas has become for many of us. And I want to remind all of us during this time of year that I'm not telling you, don't get excited about that. I can't wait to see my kids dive into their Christmas gifts. I wish I had some of the gifts my kids were getting. And so we're going to have fun with that. But I've told many of you this before, that my upbringing, when I can remember, Christmas morning for us as kids, my dad wanted us to know why we celebrate Christmas. I mean, he wanted to stress why we celebrate Christmas. And so when we would gather together on Christmas morning, we had 5 of us boys and 2 girls in my home, and we always had foster kids in our home. And so we always had extras on Christmas. And so you get a couple presents for each kid. You get a mound of Christmas presents in our family on Christmas morning. And so it was always just pretty exciting. And my little brother, he would peek at his presents. You know, some of you do that. He would kind of unwrap them and look and see what they are. And I knew that someday I was going to be a preacher. And so I didn't want to stand before you and have this guilty conscience, so I never looked. I just asked my brother what I got, and he would tell me. And so we'd have all these presents early on Christmas morning. I had friends where they could open their presents on Christmas Eve, but my dad wouldn't let us because he said Jesus didn't open his on Christmas Eve, so we're not going to. And it worked when we were kids, and as I grew up and began to understand that, my dad's a liar. We will be watching this later, so. But every Christmas morning as we were about to dive into this, and I've told many of this, as we're about to dive into our gifts, and we were all excited about what we were going to get, and Christmas morning for us kids, let's be honest, for kids, you can't help but be excited about the new gifts that you're going to get in the presents. And for parents, you can't wait to see your kids' reaction to the gifts that you get. And I know my dad did this on purpose. Right before we were about to dive into it, my dad stopped everything. And he wanted his kids, his 5 boys and 2 daughters, and whoever was in our home with us at that time, he wanted us to know why we celebrate Christmas. And my dad told us about a Jesus that loves us very much, loved us enough to come into this earth and be the ultimate sacrifice for us. And then he'd open up the Bible and he would read the Christmas story to us. And that's been ingrained in me. And so in my family, when we gather and we get ready to do that, we're going to do the exact same thing, because I want my boys and my daughter to understand that there's a God who loves them, who's crazy about them. And we get all excited about Christmas because of the gifts and the elf in the shelf and all that other stuff. But the main reason we get excited about this is because Jesus changes everything in our lives. And Jesus came and he changed everything in their dad and their mom. And we want our kids to understand that and learn that. And my hope someday is I'm an old grandpa sitting around with grandkids, and I see my son Camden or my daughter Gabrielle or my son Carson before their kids dive into gifts. I hope to see them open up God's Word and explain to their kids why we celebrate Christmas. So my challenge for us before we dive into this, I want to challenge all of us at Grace Nazarene. Listen, I'm not telling you to don't get excited about all that extra stuff, but let's not get lost on the real meaning of Christmas. That we're here this morning because there's a God who loves us very much. And he loved us enough to send Jesus into this world. And it changes us drastically. If you have your Bibles, open up to the book of Isaiah. If not, we're going to have it up on the screen for you. We're on a series called He Will Be Called. And I just want to kind of, before we dive into this isn't going to be your typical message. Some of you are probably excited about that. But I just kind of want to have a heart-to-heart with you about what God has been doing in our lives and what I believe God is going to be doing in our church. And with the idea of this Christmas, we serve a God who's in control, and he's going to take really good care of us. Book of Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6 says this, "For to us a child is born." Now keep in mind, this was prophesied about Jesus over 700 years before he was even born. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Last week we talked about Wonderful Counselor, on how Jesus came and he's this incredible guide for us, that he can help us walk through life and he can guide us and direct us and he speaks to us. And if we can learn to listen to him, he's going to take us on this incredible journey. And we talked about him being this wonderful counselor. But today we're going to be talking about him being a mighty God. And before we dive into it, I want to stress this to you. And you hear me say this a lot, but I'm absolutely convinced of this, you guys. We serve a God this morning, a mighty God who can do anything and everything. You can't talk me out of it. You can't convince me otherwise. That we have a God this morning that's not just a weak God. He's not a wimpy God. He's not a distant God, but we have a God this morning that is a mighty God, an all-powerful God. In fact, Scripture says it like this, "Ah, sovereign Lord," this is in Jeremiah, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great," say it with me, "power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." That's really good news this morning, isn't it? that regardless of your life circumstances, regardless of what's going on in your life this morning, nothing is too hard for Almighty God this morning. There's some big words we use in the church quite a bit, and you may have heard some and scratched your head on what they mean, but they're just kind of words that we use describing God. One of them is God is omniscient. It means He's all-knowing. Get this morning, that we have a God who knows everything this morning. In fact, the things that you're thinking right now, no pressure, like you're mocking my sweater. God knows that. And God likes my sweater. But the things that's going on in your mind right now, in your heart, God knows all about that. The struggles that you've walked into this place this morning, God knows all about that. The fears that you have when you're laying up at night and you can't sleep, and these fears that are just consuming you, we have an all-knowing God that knows all about that. The struggles that you're having with relationships or in your family, God knows all about that. So God is omniscient. He's all-knowing. Not only that, is God's omnipresent. That means God is everywhere. Everywhere you go, there God is. In fact, if you have an empty seat next to you this morning, guess what? God's scoot right next to you. Everywhere you go, no matter how tough it is, no matter how scary it is, no matter how good it is, everywhere you go, Scripture says that God is right there. No matter what you go through, no matter what struggle you're walking through, no matter what the situation is, we have a God who's omnipresent. He is right there with us everywhere we go. But what we're going to talk about today is God is omnipotent. It means He's all-powerful. He's able to do anything today. And my hope and my prayer as we talk about some of this morning, I'm going to be sharing some stories of what's going on in our life, that you would realize and come to the conclusion that not only do we have a mighty God, a God who is all-powerful, we have a God who's working on our behalf this morning. And I kind of want to share some stories with you this morning. Most of you know, probably almost all of you, if you've just walked in this morning, you may not know, my wife and I and family are stepping out on a new journey in life. We're going up to Bismarck in North Dakota to plant a church, starting from scratch, starting from nothing. I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, Mike, you're absolutely crazy for moving up to North Dakota. We chuckle at that because that's where my wife and I, born and raised, North Dakota. That's what we have known as home for a long, long time. And so for us to move up to North Dakota, that's not the crazy part of it. Now, there's a lot of crazy things that come with it. But as it'd be if many of you who have grown up in this area, for whatever reason, decided to trek up to North Dakota to live, you would probably talk about this area as something of comfort to you, or this is home. When you go back, you'd describe it that way. And so my family, that's basically what's going on in our life. We're not going to some foreign land. This is a community that I grew up in. It's a community that we're familiar with. And so we're heading up in that direction. And when you plant a church, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of questions. I got a lot of people that say, where are you meeting? And how many people do you have? And here's the reality. When we started this process, we had no buildings, we had no people, we had no money, we had nothing. We just knew that God was directing this, and we said yes, and we're going to take that leap of faith. And so when you plant a church, you need things like buildings, you need things like money, you need things like people. And really, we at that point didn't even have a home that we knew we were living in as up to just yesterday. But I've discovered something, you guys, that we have an all-powerful, mighty God. That regardless of where we're at and what we're doing, we have a God who can just do some amazing miracles. Many of you know, a couple weeks ago, I was up doing some missionary work up in Montana, hunting mule deer. On my way to Montana, I stopped into Bismarck because I wanted to just kind of make some connections with some people. And our church plant in Bismarck is being planted by a church in Fargo. It was a church plant about a little less than 10 years ago, and now it's about 1,500 to 1,800 people. And they're the ones that are kind of helping us along this journey and sponsoring us in this. And whatever reason, a man by the name of Ken went to visit his friend in Fargo, and this Ken lived in Bismarck, and he went to Fargo to go visit the church, and as he's in the church, he just experienced God, and God did some neat things in his life, and he went up, and his friend introduced Ken to the pastor, and Ken went up to this pastor, John, and he said, "Hey, listen, I loved what just happened today. Is there anything like this going on in Bismarck? Do you know of any churches like this in Bismarck?" And John said, "Well, man, listen, I don't yet, but let me tell you what we're doing." And he began to kind of share the vision and the dream of this church plant. And so Ken was all excited, and Ken said, "Hey, listen, just have him contact me. I'd love to talk to him about it, and I'll be willing to help in any way." And so as I'm going to Montana, I thought I got to get a hold of Ken, find out Ken was a manager at a movie theater. And so I stopped into the movie theater, and I walked up to the ticket counter, and I stuck my head down in the little window, and I said, "I'm looking for Ken, the manager." And she said, "Okay, I'll go get him." And out comes Ken. And I stuck out my hand. I said, "Ken, I'm Mike Kramer. I'm moving up to North Dakota. I just wanted to connect with you and tell you what I'm doing." And so we sat down, and I began to share the dream that Ken, we're going to be moving to Bismarck, and we're going to serve the community, and we're going to love on this community, and we're going to find the needs, and we're going to try to meet them. And we just began dialoguing about it, and you won't believe what happened. You will believe. This is how powerful our God is. Ken said, "Well, where's your building?" I said, "I don't have one, you know." He said, "Well, how many people do you have?" I said, "Well, I don't think anybody yet." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, let's look at the theater and let's walk around." And he said this. He said, "You can use this entire theater for anything you want." He said, "Whether you have church on Sunday morning," in North Dakota, there's no businesses that are open till noon on Sunday mornings. They're still a little bit traditional in that area. Everything's closed until noon in North Dakota on Sunday mornings. And so there's no movies going on in the morning. So he said, "You can have free run of this theater. You can use whatever you want. You can even pop popcorn." I thought, wow, you know, popcorn on Sunday. I said, "Man, I appreciate that." I said, "I want you to know this is an answer to prayer, and I believe God's going to bless you for it." And then he stuck out his hand and he said, "Well, I guess also you have your first member." You know how businesses, they take that dollar bill and they stick it on their wall, and it's the first dollar they made? I want to get a picture with Ken. Say, "This is my first member," and I'm going to plaster it on the wall. Now listen, I don't think that stuff is all by accident. I believe it's because we serve a mighty God. A God who can do anything and everything. And not only that, we have the starts of possibly using a building. There's funds that you have to worry about with the church plant. You come from a church this size where we have resources and we can take offerings to serve people, and we can raise money to do things. When you don't have any people, you don't have any funds, and so you just really have to pray all that in and be okay with God just using other people to do that in your life. And so this last week, we've been praying about, God, you just got to help us with these areas, and we're just trusting you in this, and we believe you're a mighty God, you're all powerful. And this last week, somebody came up to me and they stuck out their hand and said, "Mike, I love what you're doing. I think it's exciting what you're doing, and I'd like to have a part in it. Would you be okay if I wrote if I wrote your church plant a $50,000 check?" I said, "Well, I got to think about that for a few days." No, I didn't. I gave him a big old bear hug. Blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. But again, it's another reminder that if God is in these things, you guys, we serve a mighty God who can do anything and everything. And those things that we worry about and those things that we stress, if we would just release to Him, we have a mighty God who wants to just bless us and take care of us and work those miracles out in our lives. So I'm starting a church now with one person and $50,000. That's a good start, isn't it? Again, I believe we have a mighty God. And so not only do we have a person and a building, and we got some finances that we can work with now, we need to move there. And of course, one of the big things in our lives is we own a home here, and we own a home, and we have 2 labs. One of the labs is older than my kids, and we have a little, I hate to admit this because not only are you going to mock my sweater, you're going to mock my dog. We got a toy poodle that my kids, they don't remember life without this little dog. And so I'm thinking, boy, we're going to move and we're going to have to go rent a home. And homes there to rent, just to give you an idea, to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, it's going to cost us about $1,500. To get a 3-bedroom apartment, which would be ideal for us, would be between $1,800 and $2,000. And it's just kind of obviously scary, you know? What if we don't sell our house? And how are we going to get through this? And you just start to work through all of that. And we just begin praying about it. And I got a wife who is just a little bit crazy in these areas. She believes that God can answer prayer, and she's just praying hard on this. And as I'm going through some context in my mind to talk about this church plant, there's a girl that was in our youth group many years ago that I heard possibly moved to Bismarck. So I called her mom, and her mom's name is Kelly, and I said, Kelly, I'd like to know what Taylor's doing. Did she move out to Bismarck? Did I hear right? And she said, yeah, she is, and here's her number. So I called Taylor, and I called Taylor, and I shared the vision with Taylor on what we're doing, and she'd married a guy named Jordan, and as we got talking, she was all excited about it and wanted to be a part of it, and I said, well, I tell you what, we're going to be moving up there the 1st of January. I said, we don't have a house yet, but we're just trusting that God's going to help us with that. And she said, oh, wait a minute. She said, my husband, Jordan, he works with his dad, and his dad buys homes, fixes them up, and rents them or sells them to people. She goes, I know he'll hook you up. I said, well, call him. Hook us up. So she gave me his number, and I called him, and I talked to him, and I just shared with him what was going on. And his name is Todd. I said, hey, Todd, I just want to share with you what's going on. And the first thing Todd said was, you're a man of God, aren't you, Mike? I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, I want you to know my dad is a district superintendent in the Assembly of God Church. I said, that's crazy, man. This is a wild coincidence. My dad's a district superintendent in the Nazarene Church. And he just began to share stories about his upbringing, and I began to share stories of my upbringing. And he said, I tell you what, Mike, I got a house right now that we'll be able to help you with. And not only that, but in the basement of the house, it's all set up for office space, and you can go ahead and use that, and we're not going to charge you any extra for that. In fact, he cut about $500 off the rent of the place for us. And so as of last night, we got a house to move to. It's a big deal to us. I said, Todd, I don't want to put you on the spot. And this isn't a deal breaker. I got 3 dogs. I said, no pressure, man. I know how it is. He said, Mike, we'll put up a fence. We'll take care of that. And so even as odd as it might sound to some of you, to go to my kids and say, we're bringing the dogs. There's a celebration in the Kramer home yesterday with 3 little kids that were pretty worried about that. Mom and Dad, they can go, but they wanted their dogs. So God just is piecing all of this together. And you can't convince me otherwise, you guys. We serve a mighty God. And so I don't want to just bore you with stories of what's going on in your life. I say all that to say this to you. That same mighty God that is blessing our family right now, and that's fitting all this together, that same mighty God is at work within our church here. That same mighty God has a plan for this place. That same all-powerful God has big plans for this place. And I want you during this Christmas season, I know some of you have taken this hard. Some of you are celebrating, but some of you are taking this a little bit hard, and you're worried about what's going to happen in the future. I know this. I can say this with certainty, that we serve an all-powerful, mighty God that's going to take really good care of us. And this church has some of its most exciting days ahead of it. And we can count on that. And we can anticipate that. because I believe this. Jesus' power is at work for you this morning. Jesus' power is at work for you this morning. Isaiah 40:29-31 says this. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youth grow tired and weary. And I put in parentheses there, youth in the Hebrew means Olympic athlete, the best of the best. Even the youths grow weary and tired, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. So my encouragement for all of us this morning is, listen, this mighty God that we serve, that we come every Sunday and we sing to, and we go through this service, and for some of us it's very meaningful, maybe for some of us it's just kind of ritual, it's what we do on Sunday. But we come because a little over 2,000 years ago, this little baby was born and changed all of mankind. Jesus. And 700 years before he came, a prophet by the name of Isaiah stood up and said, listen, there's going to be this baby born. The government's going to be on his shoulders, and they will call him Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God. It all happened, just as he said. And so this morning, I want to encourage you with this. The same mighty God, this same Jesus that was born over 2,000 years ago is at work on your behalf this morning. His power is at work on your behalf. And so regardless of what you're going through, regardless of your struggles, regardless if you even feel like you're in your weakest place in life, Jesus' power is working on your behalf. This blows me away, but it's true. It's, you go around, and we like watching Christmas lights, and my family, they like the Hallmark Channel during Christmas, and I don't know about them. It's probably why I'm wearing a sweater like this. We get excited during Christmas time. But all the statistics will tell you that during this time of year, more people deal with depression than any other time of the year. That there's people that really wrestle with some things and struggle with some things. And so I can't help but believe that in this place, there's some people that are wrestling with some things this morning. You got some areas in your life that just seem too big for you. I want to encourage you with this, that Jesus came on your behalf, and right now, even as I'm speaking, His power is at work for you this morning. And even in your weakest times, even in the most difficult times, His strength can get you through. In fact, listen to what this scripture says in 2 Corinthians. It says, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, and the insults, the hardships, the persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, I am strong." That's good stuff, isn't it? So regardless of what you're going through this morning, you guys, because I know this, some of you this morning are stressed about your finances. How in the world are we going to get? How am I going to pay for? And you just feel like you're at just the bottom. Man, when you're weak, His strength can pick you up, and He can work a miracle out in your life. Some of you have relationship issues. Maybe it's a son or a daughter or a grandchild. Maybe it's somebody that's strayed and you raised them a certain way and you poured into them, but for whatever reason, they've taken a different path in their life, and it just kills you inside, especially this time of year. Man, His power is at work in you. We got a God who's a mighty God who can do anything and everything. Some of you have stresses in your life that you just don't know how you're going to get through them, and you got mountains in your way and valleys in your way, and you're just not sure how you're going to get through them, but I want to stress to you, we got a God who's all-powerful. He's a mighty God, and He can do anything and everything. And so the question I want to ask all of us this morning, and I want you to really think through this, is what miracle do you need this Christmas? Really, what miracle do you need this Christmas? It was prophesied about Jesus, long before He even came, that He's not just going to be a wonderful counselor, He's going to be a mighty God. He can do anything and everything, and so what miracle do you need? I'm crazy enough to believe that He can do it. that whatever situation you are dealing with this morning, our mighty God is all powerful enough to take care of it. I'd like everybody to bow their heads and close their eyes and just do this for me, nobody looking around. I want to pray for you this morning. I think it's one of the best things I could probably do for people is just approach God's throne on their behalf. How many say just by quickly slipping up their hands, I'm not going to call you out or make you stand up, but how many say, you know what, I got a real need in my life today and I could use a miracle this Christmas. Why don't you just quick shoot your hand up and put it down? All over this place. All over this place. Can I encourage you with this? We have a mighty God this morning. An all-powerful God. A God who can really do anything and everything, and I buy into it. Not only do I buy into it, I'm experiencing it in my own life right now. There's still a lot of unsure things about what my family is doing, but we're just in a place right now in our lives where we're just simply trusting Him. Because I believe He's a mighty God. I'm going to pray for you. Then our worship team's going to sing a song. But even as I'm praying for you, I'd like some of you just to start praying out to God, whatever that miracle might be. Again, I mentioned this many times in the church. We've been told to leave your baggage outside the church and come on in and have fun and worship and leave all your problems at the door. I just think that's a bunch of baloney. I think every time we come into this place, we need to bring the good, the bad, the ugly. Bring in the garbage, bring in the mess, bring in the stress, bring in the financial issues, bring in the relationship issues, bring in the sin that we're struggling with, because we have a God who's a mighty God and He's all-powerful, and I believe that this morning He can take care of those things for you. And I'm going to pray that for you right now. Jesus, we love You. I thank You for Your word today, and I believe this. You are a mighty God. You've proven it over and over and over again in my life. It's crazy, but it seems like every time You do it, I'm still amazed by it. I'm just absolutely blown away at how powerful You really are, and the things that I stress over, if I would just give them to You, You just seem to take care of them. From the little things in life to the big things in life. And I know this, it's not always just the way I would do it. And it's not that You don't allow me to go through some very difficult times. But it just seems like when I'm at my weakest point, You come in and You pick me up and You make me strong. I just want to tell You, I thank You for that. I thank You this morning that I can have my confidence just totally in You. But I know this, there's all sorts of people that have come into this place this morning. They're good people, people that You love dearly, that they've come into this place this morning, they got some real issues in their life. Some of them are just, their finances are killing them. And this time of year just seems to bring it all to light. But God, I believe You're all powerful, and I believe You're a mighty God. So God, would You just do some incredible miracles in their life this week? God, I know there's some marriage issues in this place. For whatever reason, it just seems like the enemy nowadays is just attacking marriages, and it seems like marriage is just, our culture just seems like it's falling apart. And so even in this place, there's some marriages that are just on the rocks right now, and You love each one of those in that relationship, but God, they need a miracle. And I know even right now they're probably crying out for a miracle. So Father, in Your amazing way, would You this week just do something special in their lives? Would You just give them a glimpse of hope? God, I know there's us in here that have children or grandchildren they're just making poor choices. And we know where it's leading them, and we know the outcome because maybe we've had a little bit more life experience, but they just don't see it yet. So God, I know there's some families in here that need a miracle with their children and their grandchildren. So I ask wherever those kids or grandkids are right now that You would just overwhelm them right now with Your love. I pray that You would just overwhelm them with Your love. they would just make some changes in their lives and maybe call a parent or a grandparent and just say, listen, just something's going on in me. And God, I know there's mountains and there's valleys and there's other things that are in people's way this morning, and there's all sorts of stresses that people are dealing with, but we want to acknowledge to you that we believe this morning that you are a mighty God, an all-powerful God, and you can do anything and everything. And we're going to trust you with that. We look forward to the miracles taking place this week because we believe that's the kind of God you are. Pray this in Jesus' name.